It's official, we finally know when we can pre-order the M2 MacBook Air and when it will start arriving. But with that, some people are saying that the M2 MacBook Air is going to be disappointing, just like the recycled M2 MacBook Pro. Well, in this video, I will be sharing my opinions on this machine with you, who should buy it and who should avoid it, along with an updated buyer's guide with all of the knowledge that we have gained testing and comparing the M2 MacBook Pro to give you guys the best information on which one you should order and which specs you should upgrade. Now, right out of the gate, I have to say that I am extremely excited for this machine. Now, yes, it is not going to be groundbreaking in performance. It will be slower than the M2 MacBook Pro, which was already a bit disappointing with certain configurations compared to what was advertised and what we expected. Now, with that said, this is a brand new redesign. It's an extremely thin machine. Just looking online at videos doesn't do it justice. And it has lots of nice creature comfort upgrades that will make this machine last and be enjoyable for many years to come. I think that the average person that buys one of these is going to absolutely love it compared to their previous Intel Mac or their Windows machine, and it will make a lot of people happy. Now, with that said, if this machine is starting to push your budget, buying it for $1,200 and then adding on the upgrades that I'm going to strongly suggest, I would say take a look at the M1 MacBook Air. The performance of those machines are amazing, and you can pick one up for about $800 refurbished on Amazon. We've seen them as low as $850 for brand new ones with full warranties, and it will do everything you need, maybe even better than the M2 MacBook Air. Now, how in the world can I say that? Well, two reasons. The first one is the SSD situation. We found in our testing that the base SSD was at times half the speed of the M1s, and that it can make a real world difference even for tasks that are not that difficult. Now, it's not because you need an extremely fast SSD, you're not constantly transferring files, but when you open up different web browsing tabs, say Google Drive, maybe YouTube video and some other things, and you open up an application, you do run out of memory, because remember, macOS needs 4 to 5 gigabytes by itself, and you only have 8. And that's when the SSD is used as RAM, and that is when the M1 ended up being faster than the M2. Now, with that, we have to talk about thermal throttling. We know that the M1 slowed down from 3 gigahertz down to 2.9, 2.8, and all the way down, I believe, to like 2.2 or 2.3 because it doesn't have a fan. Now, with this machine, we were hoping that Apple put in maybe a bigger heat spreader or possibly some other kind of cooling like vapor chamber, but based on the information that we've gotten recently, for example, there was an interview with MKBHD, Apple is reiterating that the M2 Pro is the one that you need for consistent high performance, meaning that they most likely didn't do any better cooling. And on top of that, this machine is extremely thin. It's a 20% reduction overall, and that doesn't help for heat. And with that, we found that the M2 chip used about 33% more power in order to get 13% more performance. So when we combine all of those things, the chances that the M2 chip will perform much better over the M1, it just isn't very realistic. Now, that is not a horrible thing. It has better single core performance, has better memory bandwidth, and for the tasks that most people do, it will do a great job. So counting in the redesign, the better webcam, the speakers, the fast charging, that updated display, you will be very happy with it. But don't think that you should get the M2 MacBook Air for better performance. Now, let's get into the updated buyer's guide. The first thing I would suggest is to upgrade that SSD. most likely we're still gonna see a single NAND chip, just like the M2 MacBook Pro. And because of that, if you also have 8 gigs of RAM, well, then you can get slower performance than the M1 MacBook Air. Now, some YouTubers are now saying, well, sure, you did find that it does make a difference in the real world, but most people won't even notice that. And that might be true, but just because you don't notice that something is worse than the previous generation, that doesn't make it okay, at least in our opinion. Things should get better, not worse. By upgrading the SSD, you will not have slower RAM swap than the previous generation. Now, if you really don't need the storage, in that case, spend a little bit more money and go for the 16 gig RAM option. The M2 chip is a really nice chip by itself, but it does need extra RAM or normal fast SSDs to work its best. For example, when we exported 42 megapixel images, it did that in about 2 minutes, slightly faster than the M1. But with that, when we tested out the 512 gig model with no other applications, no web browsing open, just Lightroom, it took 1 minute and 45 seconds. So that's a 12.5% improvement, or 15 depending how you do the math, just by getting a larger SSD option. But switching to 16 gigs of RAM, that took 1 minute and 7 seconds. We've never seen that big of an improvement just by having a higher amount of RAM. It is incredible. So that M2 chip really needs to be unlocked, and Apple should have gave us either more SSD or more RAM at the base price for these machines with this M2 chip. So do yourself a favor, if you're gonna do productivity of any sort, custom order one and get 16 gigs and 512 if you can afford it. That will make a huge difference for productivity, much more so than before. And for those that ask why would I recommend that, where with the M1 I recommended getting the 8 gig? Well, now we are being a lot more limited by the SSDs and the RAM compared to the M1, and compared to Intel chips, way more so. When the CPU and GPU itself is a limitation, you don't start feeling that difference for RAM and SSD. I mean, we do super deep dive testing in this, but when the chip is so good that it needs to be fed faster and with a bigger amount of storage and the RAM amount, well, you see massive improvements. Now, as far as upgrading to the better GPU option, I would not recommend doing that. We know we're gonna be thermally throttled. Apple has said that themselves. They showed it off on their charts. So upgrading to extra cores that will then be slowed down more so because of thermal limitations, I don't think it makes sense to do that. So there you guys go. We are gonna be able to order this on Friday, this Friday here in a day and a half. And then on the 15th is when it's gonna be coming out. We cannot wait to get ours. We're ordering multiple options to be comparing them. We'll see the performance compared to the M1. So if you guys wanna wait for that before ordering, you guys can definitely do that. And then you'll be able to see what the very best option is and how much the differences in upgrades will affect your specific workload, not just in general. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Max. Click that circle above to subscribe. Check out one of those great videos right over there, and I'll see you in the next one.